You know how we say that we don't really know why humans need to sleep? I mean, we do, to an extent. But it's still a massive scientific work in progress. The body uses time sleeping to do a ton of wild stuff, from healing the body to compartmentalizing memories. The only thing is, that's all we found so far. Of course, the best way to study what something does is by studying what happens in the absence of it. The longest on record is 18 days, and by that time, the cognitive function of most people isn't too great. Granted, this was all done without using any kind of performance enhancers, so to speak. I got a job offer weeks ago, a sleep deprivation study sponsored by the US government. Ethical? Absolutely not. But they gave me a proposition I couldn't refuse, to use the old cliché. You see, I'm genetically predisposed to a prion disease called fatal familial insomnia. Right now, I haven't shown any signs of it, and on average, it doesn't start to onset until around 50. So I have a good few years left before things go to hell for me. So while I can, I've dedicated myself to research into finding a cure for prion diseases, in some desperate hope that I can fix my own genetic fuck-up. No luck so far, but they recruited me with the promise of access to CRISPR technology to further work on genetic modifications, and I wasn't passing that up. Even if I can't do it for myself in time, it can save people down the line from the hell I saw my mother go through. The hell that awaited me whenever the fucking prion decided it was my time. So, the basic thesis of the experiment was that we have 5 subjects, all people that were made to disappear by good old Uncle Sam. We weren't given any previous information or even names. Just these 5 people, literally assigned numbers as their names so we couldn't figure out who they were. These people would be studied as they were deprived of sleep, using any methods possible to make sure they stayed conscious. These methods would range from drugs, rewards, torture, or anything that would prevent sleep. Again, it wasn't ethical, but I'm doing this to hopefully save some innocent people down the line. Myself, 2 other researchers, 1 guard to each of the subjects were given a modestly sized lab environment to work with, and amenities for non-subjects were pretty nice. We had beds, a full kitchen complete with a cook who came in for lunch and dinner, and entertainment for those of us not currently working. Good thing because this place was our home for the foreseeable future, until this experiment was over. The subjects had things a lot less comfortable than we did. They were kept in a common room with individual rooms that split off from it, consisting of bathrooms, showers, and various entertainment options. I know, giving people so awful they were erased by the government doesn't seem like a great thing, but we want to keep their minds stimulated to keep them awake. There would be meals brought in at regular intervals, all with the sufficient nutrition needed to thrive. Every single room was monitored by no less than 3 cameras, even the bathrooms, so we could constantly keep watch on every subject. In addition, there was a viewing room in front of the main common area, one-way glass allowing us to directly observe. From here on, everything is presented from my daily research notes for a full picture of how things develop. This is the personal record of Dr. Michael A. Ripley, kept for my own future research and records. Day 1. Everything is going smoothly so far. I met my fellow researchers, Philip and Taryn, early on, and we determined how we would split work and observation. 8-hour shifts each. Taryn would take the midnight to 8 AM. I would take over until 4 PM. Then Philip would finish out the night before Taryn came back to cover for him. It was easy enough, and we would have at least 2 guards keeping watch with us at all times in case a situation arose. Taryn's shift came and went without incident. The subjects were gathered around one of the tables, folding chairs set up for seats. That was the most comfort they had though. There were no beds, only a hard metal cot on the walls with no padding or pillow. I'm assuming that's about what they were accustomed to though, because nobody was really complaining about it. Subject 1 is a male in his mid-20s, dark hair, scrawny, pale as hell, looked like a school shooter stereotype. 2 is an older man, early 50s, balding and covered in some questionable tattoos. We weren't given any info on what he did, but you don't get that many swastikas permanently inked on by making good life decisions. 3 is in his 40s. He had a kind face, wry smile that looked like he would crack a dad joke at any time. Honestly, a pretty jovial guy. Probably the only one I have no idea how he could have ended up here. 4 looked like Jeffrey Dahmer reborn in the digital age. I assume he's in for similar acts as Dahmer too. Hearing him talk over the monitor gave me the creeps. Just monotone and uncaring. There was nothing behind his eyes. 5 looked like the American Psycho type. Wealthy, no human empathy or consideration for life. And that Tom Cruise look where every little move was rehearsed to best manipulate anyone he interacted with. I swear I saw him staring into the cameras a few times, right at me, and he would just smile. None of them knew what the experiment was. As of now, the sleep deprivation methods weren't in play, being so early. It wouldn't be until near the middle of my shift that things needed a little push. 2 was yawning, and he said he was going to his bunk for a nap. So I hit the dial in his room to make sure that didn't happen. There was no control for the lighting on their end, so I dialed up the intensity of the fluorescence. Then I activated a small speaker hidden behind his bed, playing a frequency that would disrupt any attempt at sleep for a while. The others stayed in the common area, bullshitting about why they were here. Nothing of note happened otherwise. Day 2. They're getting irritable. To be expected, considering they're now hitting over 24 hours without sleep. So far, the light and sound methods of deprivation have worked fine, with nobody wise to what's happening yet. I do believe the irritability will lead to tensions by tomorrow. 4 is beginning to exhibit paranoia, frequently looking around, speaking to himself under his breath, and generally acting on edge. More than once, I've seen him staring directly into the camera, though I'm not sure if he realized it was there. Creeped me out nonetheless. Around noon on my shift, 1 began to speak to 3. I've transcribed their conversation below. 1.
Do you see them?
3.
Sorry, who? I can see all of us in here, but nothing else.
1.
The kids.
3.
Excuse me?
1.
They told me what you did.
3.
I don't know what you're talking about.
1.
Sure you do. How many were there?
3.
Please leave me alone.
1.
You're the reason I'm here. Why should I leave you alone?
At this point, I called in one of the guards, Murray, just in case something started to go down in there. 3, despite his kinder, laid-back attitude, was definitely starting to get on edge. 1 did leave him alone though, walking over to his own room and sitting on the metal cot, staring at the wall for the next 2 hours with this smile on his face, like he was totally zoned out. I'm still not sure what any of them did, so I don't know if 1 was actually onto something or not. 3 was certainly shaken by it though, sitting alone and not saying anything for the rest of the day. Eventually, he went to his room, laying on the cot while tossing and turning. From the notes Philip left, he's been complaining of the others being too loud, saying they're shouting when everyone is talking in whispers at best, like an early sign of prolonged sleep deprivation. 2 and 4 have been oddly friendly, though I'm not entirely sure why. I've heard them briefly talk about their jobs in their early life. 2 was some sort of construction contractor, while 4 specialized in industrial chemicals. Of course, that's before or during whatever got them in here. I'll keep an eye on how their relationship develops. I expect many of them to break down after a certain point. Day 3. Today was relatively calm, with barely anything of note happening. The subjects have begun to isolate after over 48 hours without sleep, each staying to their own room or corner of the main area. I have noticed 4 increasingly talking to himself, more hurried and louder than previously. Most of it was nonsense, sounding like the paranoid ramblings of some budget Alex Jones. Subject 5 is the one that's been most interesting to watch. He's going along with this just fine, Not even a sign of irritability or paranoia. All he's done is sit in his own corner, just watching the others. Occasionally, he would give a smirk. But for the most part, he just remained quiet there. Day 4. They've begun to realize what's happening. 3 approached 5, asking him when the last time he slept was. Upon realizing it was before they were sent in here, they started to ask the others. 1 said he was awake for 72 hours prior to arriving, suffering from insomnia as is, so I guess we had a little head start there. Everyone else agreed they were going on day 4 though, referencing the clock and calendar on the wall to be sure. 2 began to get irritable, screaming to be let out and told what was going on. 3 tried to calm him, telling him it was likely we were being monitored. 4 started to search the entire place for cameras, though he didn't succeed. 1 was in his room, already deep in the throes of paranoia and whispering that they were coming for him. From what I can gather, he's seeing hallucinations. At one point, he was pointing at the door, screaming at something on the other side, telling it that it wasn't welcome in his room. It sounded like he was rebuking a vampire, telling it that it didn't have permission. At some point, 2 started screaming at him to shut up, the screams only getting louder as the rebuke from 1 turned into pleas with whatever was there to leave him alone. His cries were haunting, legitimately terrified of whatever the sleep deprivation was making him see. During all this, 5 remained in his corner, watching silently. He had by far done the least in his whole time here, but he had been awake the entire time. From my best guess, he was dissociating into a possible type of meditation, perhaps relieving some of his sleep deficiency. Day 5. Our methods to date for sleep deprivation are starting to become null. 2 has nodded off, while 4 was going into a state of microsleeps to compensate. We upped it to the next phase, introducing amphetamines through their meals. There was a very noticeable burst in alertness from everyone, though some started to display signs of what's commonly called cabin fever. 4 began to scratch at his skin, determined that something was trying to get out of his body. Guards were on standby to assess. Before long, he had gouged long lines in his arms, blood beginning to ooze from the wounds. Murray was sent in as medical, another guard named Greg accompanying to ensure the other subjects complied. Murray.
Why are you injuring yourself?
4.
Because I need to let it out.
Murray.
Let what out?
4.
My soul.
Murray.
Your soul? Why do you need to let your soul out?
4.
Because it's been trapped. It wants out before it's stuck inside forever.
Murray.
Alright, buddy. Let's get you wrapped up to stop the bleeding.
2.
Mind telling me why the hell we're in here? I haven't slept since stepping through that door.
Murray.
You don't deserve an answer.
2.
Tell me what's going on.
He became violent here, smashing a hand into the concrete wall. Greg draws his gun.
Calm the fuck down, man.
2.
No, you don't tell me what to do. I got given rights to my life.
Murray.
You don't have rights anymore.
After he left the room, Murray gave me the rundown of the current mood in there. The smell is terrible according to him, and up close, everyone looks ragged. Apparently, the look in 4's eyes was that of a dead man, and Murray was former Special Forces, so I'll take his word on it. Philip told me that 4 was still trying to claw at his skin during the night, and the guards eventually had to go in and forcibly restrain him to keep him from doing any lasting damage. Since then, he's just begged for someone to kill him, so his soul can leave. I don't know what he means by that, but the feeling of dread that sunk into my gut is something that scares me. There's a foreboding here that I really don't like. Day 6. I'm shaken, to put it lightly. Subject 1 at this point has been awake the longest of them all, at least 9 days, give or take some hours. His onset of symptoms has been somewhat of a litmus test for the others, getting an idea of what could change. I fear, though, that we're only getting into the worst of the symptoms. We got around 2 in the afternoon today when one went into his room, sitting on the metal cot. Everyone else was isolating, with 2 walking around and screaming every so often in anger. 3 was in his room, rocking back and forth under the bed while apologizing under his breath. 4 was near catatonic in his room, staring at the wall. Meanwhile, 5 was just going about business. He was the only one to keep up some semblance of hygiene at this point, as the others hadn't showered since arriving. Pretty sure I saw some of them not even cleaning up after using the toilet, so I can't imagine the smell in the room. From what Murray told me yesterday, it made him want to gag. I was recording amphetamine dosages, making sure we weren't going to overdose anyone, when I heard my name. At first, I assumed it was Murray, checking in to see if I wanted anything from the kitchen. When I looked around and didn't find him though, my name was spoken again. This time, from over the sound feed. One was staring at the camera, addressing me directly as he gazed right into me through the monitor. 1.
Why are you doing this, Michael?
I didn't respond. I couldn't. There's no way he could know who I am. No way that he could know my name. They didn't even know we were in here in the first place. As far as they knew, this was just a guard surveillance room behind the one-way glass. 1.
This won't help you. You can't be cured.
At this point, I'm in the midst of an anxiety attack, full-blown panic and pressing the little call button I had for the guards. Murray came shuffling in, asking if he had to go back into the shit pit again, as he called it now. He saw me in the midst of a meltdown, one still speaking to me directly. 1.
You'll die screaming. You're lucky though.
At that point, Murray took me out of the room, shouting for Philip to come in and take over for a time. He set me down in the small medical bay we had, stocked with typical EMS supplies, and gave me an anti-anxiety drug to try and get me to relax. Philip took over for the remainder of my shift and into his, so I could go on to bed and try to clear my mind. They believed me that he was talking, but were trying to give me rational reasons for what he was saying. He had been talking to himself, so maybe his name was Michael as well. Maybe it was just a hallucination of someone he knew previously. I was willing to accept any kind of rationalization at this point, but the dread still sunk deep into my chest, telling me that wasn't the case. I'm going to lay down now, but wanted to type out these notes while they were fresh in my mind. The medicine is making me feel drowsy. Day 7. I slept fitfully last night. This morning though, I found out that Philip had a similar experience as I did. One was speaking to him in the same way, under his breath and laughing. Though he wouldn't tell me what he was saying. He was shaken to the core because one called him by name too. We decided to sit in with Taryn during her shift this morning, just in case anything happened. It didn't take long. One was still sitting in his bunk, muttering under his breath, when he mentioned Taryn by name this time. 1.
Do you miss it, Taryn?
Taryn didn't know how to reply, obviously. She wasn't quite sure what was happening, since she hadn't had the experience Philip and I had. 1.
Do you miss the way he touched you?
She grew pale, running from the room and barely making it into the hallway before throwing up whatever breakfast she had. 1.
He does. He misses it.
He was laughing now, chuckling under his breath.
He's right here if you'd like to say hello. Daddy misses you, Taryn.
Jesus fucking Christ, was all Philip could manage to get out. I ran out after Taryn, trying to console her from the massive anxiety attack she was now having. The poor girl was crouched in a corner of the hallway, hands over her head like she was in a tornado drill, hyperventilating hard. Please make him stop, she sobbed, begging anyone that would listen. One of the other subjects started shouting at one as he laughed louder, pressing on their already frayed nerves. Philip shouted for me to come back as 2 walked into one's room, ready to fight. I called Murray over, getting him on standby in case things got bad. 2.
Would you shut the fuck up?
He grabbed one, bashing his head into the wall like he was throwing a bloody alarm clock to shut it up. One didn't stop laughing, despite another hit right into the wall. Murray ran in, trying to keep one from being killed as two grabbed him again, going for another hit. One didn't stop laughing, now looking at two. One.
They found me. They'll find you soon too. You're out of your cell.
Two.
The fuck are you even talking about, you little shit?
One.
How many girls were there?
Two.
What?
One.
I can't count them all. The room is getting crowded.
Two smashes one's head into the wall again.
Shut up! Shut up!
Around this time, Murray ran in, another guard on duty following him to help restrain the big man. One was still laughing, now counting out loud. Honestly, if it wasn't for the caved-in part of his head, it would be hilarious. He was letting out a laugh between every number, like the damned count on Sesame Street. Murray grabbed two, pulling him back and throwing him into his own room before shutting the door, pulling out keys to lock it so he would have solitary time to chill out. For the first time, we had to pull a patient out, bringing one into a small medical bay to assess his injuries. By every part of science that I know of, he shouldn't have been alive, much less conscious right then. There he was though, sitting on the medical table and laughing, muttering under his breath about all the lovely people coming out to make sure he was okay. I got chills then, because he started saying names as he looked around the room. Our exams were showing that he was in perfect cognitive shape still, other than the lack of sleep. Hell, it looks like he was starting to come back around into a more clarified state. What better time to get some direct answers, right? Me. One, what are you seeing right now? One. The other kids, classmates, friends, bullies. Me. What kids? One. The kids I buried. My blood ran cold, wondering if he could be delusional by this point. He was ahead of the others when it came to time awake, so his symptoms were definitely going to be more advanced than the others. One. Oh, hi Coach Mitchell. Suddenly, as I was examining his pupils to see if they were still reacting to light, he began to seize on the table. Before I knew what was happening, a mass of blood and organs erupted from his stomach, seemingly being grabbed and torn from the outside. Murray. Jesus, what in the hell? Mike, did you do that? I was backed away from the table now, blood spattered across my face and clothes. On the table, one was laughing harder now, looking around his surroundings wildly. One. Ah, that feels so much better. I rushed forward, desperately trying to fit his organs back into his abdomen and keep him alive. He looked more peaceful now, in some kind of relief from before. Despite the blood rushing from his insides, he wasn't showing any signs of trauma or stress in his psychological response. His body at this point should have been shutting down from shock, but he was almost refreshed, like he had just woken from a satisfying nap. Me. One, can you still hear me? One. Oh yes, I can hear you. Sorry about that earlier. Me. What exactly happened, One? One. They want to keep me here. They're still mad. Me. Who's mad, One? One. I told you. The people I buried. The people I loved. I didn't want anyone else to get them. And now, they don't want anyone else to get me. Me. Get you? What do you mean? One. The jailer. I don't really know what he's talking about. After that, he just laid on the table while I did what I could to stitch him up. Whatever happened, it looked like he had been pulled every which way from the inside until his guts finally burst through his skin. Some organs were shredded, with his spleen in at least 3 different pieces that weren't going to do anything for him anymore. Despite all, he just stayed there, catatonic but smiling like he was finally comfortable. I stitched and bandaged his stomach, finally getting some of the bleeding under control. I wasn't sure what to do with the shredded organs I found, just removing them so they didn't go necrotic inside. The next thing he did is something that I, before now, would have thought was something from a horror movie. One got up, walking right to the door with only a little bit of a limp in his gait, his skull half caved in, blood already oozing through the bandage. He walked from the medical bay, going to the door back into the subject room. As he passed by Taryn in the hallway, he briefly looked at her. 1. I'm sorry about earlier. He was a very angry man, very intimidating. I see how it happened so much. Taryn. What is wrong with you? How the hell did you know that? 1. He was whispering in my ear. He looks back down the hallway to Murray and I. Can someone let me back in? I'd like to apologize to the bad man. What else was I supposed to do? We let him in, and he went straight to 2's door. Looking through the glass at the angry man, now banging on the thick glass of his door to try and get at the scrawny boy. He stopped in shock when he got a good look at him, noticing the massive amount of blood and caved-in head. 1.
I feel bad for you. I don't feel bad for many people, but you're about to have a bad time.
2.
Who the fuck are you? What do you know about me?
1.
Everything. They told me all of it. They said they'll see you soon though, so I don't need to do anything.
3, 4, and 5 were backed against the farthest wall they could be as 1 spoke. I think this was the first time I saw 5 break the cool exterior, genuine fear in his face as he looked at the mangled 1. The worst, though, was 3, who was now pale and looked like he had seen a ghost. 1 turned to the rest of them. Now that his apology was over, his flattened skull was unnerving, even watching over a security monitor. As the other 3 subjects looked on in horror, 1 went into his room, smiling as he sat back down on his cot, going into a near catatonic state. Taryn was able to compose herself enough to tell us about why she had that reaction. I won't go too into her personal trauma, but to put it short, she was molested by her father as a child. At some point in her teens, she fought back, pushing him hard enough that he fell in their bathroom, cracking his head on the toilet and dying. She was in tears as she told us this, saying she had never told anyone but the cops and their therapist about this, and there shouldn't be any way that 1 would know. We compared notes, finding out that each of us had something he shouldn't know about. My disease, Taryn's trauma, and Philip, who confessed he had killed 2 people in a drunk driving accident, one that his father managed to get him out of thanks to some money and a prosecutor friend. Philip took over the rest of Taryn's watch while I tried to rest in preparation for mine. It was useless though, as all I could see every time I closed my eyes was 1 being ripped to shreds from the inside out, smiling the whole time. He was thankful for what had happened, like they were protecting him from some great evil that we didn't know of. I needed to figure out who this jailer he spoke of is. It's all my mind could think about as I tossed in bed for hours, expecting Philip to call me in at any moment about some new insanity. He didn't, much to my surprise, and I dragged myself in to prepare for my watch, getting up to speed from him as I poured a cup of coffee in the kitchen. For the most part, things were slow compared to the usual. I don't know if the chaos of the day already was a sign of peace for the rest, but I would take it at this point. I observed everyone closely. 1 was in a near catatonic state, awake but completely checked out. I don't know if it was because of his wounds or just the deprivation, but he was staring off into nothing, stupid smile on his face like he was daydreaming. 5 looked legitimately shaken now, peering around periodically in nervous glances. 2 was still locked in his room while 3 was sitting in a corner, facing in and muttering to himself. 4 meanwhile had taken to chewing on his fingernails, obsessively gnawing down like a dog going at a bone. Before long, he began to draw blood, chomping at fingertips and skin now. Murray went in, restraining his hands behind him to keep him from chewing on them while he wrapped them up. By the end, they were basically in full casts, keeping him from doing any real damage. Most of the remainder of my watch was uneventful, all things considered. 2 was surprisingly chill by the time I finished out and Philip came back. But 1 was beginning to crack again. Murray and I decided it was best to isolate one for the time being, letting two out of his confinement. Philip took over so I could rest again before I took Terrence's shift. Day 8. Compared to the eventfulness of the previous few days, today was boring almost. I should be grateful for the quiet and calm, with the patients showing only spurts of delirium at this point between catatonic periods. I've theorized they're falling into microsleep periodically at this point in an automated survival measure. Microsleep will sustain their brain function while also keeping them conscious, allowing brief respites to the deprivation and the time to compartmentalize new mental information. It's no substitute for deep REM sleep, of course. One was still alive, though how, we have no fucking clue. He was still bleeding pretty steadily, with no signs of stopping, as there was a puddle of blood on his cot now. He didn't seem to mind though, as he was starting to laugh again, falling back into delirium quickly as he went. I didn't sleep well again last night, the feelings of terror and images of one's insides haunting me again. His caved-in head is starting to show signs of possible swelling in the brain, beginning to bulge back out. If it's affecting him though, he's not letting it known beyond the same deprivation symptoms. It kept me up all night though, theorizing on what this jailer could be. From what I can tell, it's a hallucination of sleep itself, because one keeps talking about how he's been gone too long, and it's going to notice. He says the other kids tell him about what the jailer will do. And it's, well, disturbing to say the least. I had Murray escort me to speak to one again, trying to get some answers as he was muttering under his breath again. Me. Subject 1, who is the jailer you keep talking about? 1. He keeps us here. Every time you go to sleep, he makes sure you don't stay here. Me. Where is here? 1. Awake. Me. So this jailer makes you sleep so you won't stay awake? Why wouldn't you want to stay awake? 1. Because they'll find you. At this point, he broke down into incoherent gibberish, talking about how they're going to find me too eventually. It was around that point that Murray and I exited, deciding getting any real information was a lost cause. On our way out, we noticed 2 was having an episode of delirium, coming up to us as we try to exit. 2. You gotta let me out of here. They're all over. They keep telling me that they're going to rip my soul apart. Me. Who? One of the other subjects? 2. The girls. The girls keep telling me they're going to rip my soul apart. They're going to eat it so they can finally leave. Murray and I were perplexed, to say the least, and all I could say was, I'll see what I can do, before we walked out, locking the door behind us and finally letting out breaths we didn't realize we were holding this whole time. It shook me, seeing these 2 exhibiting similar symptoms, unsure of if it was the deprivation or just a shared delusion between them. My skeptic mind was telling me to discount the option that was screaming at me from the shadows, that we were messing with forces beyond our understanding. The rest of my shift passed without incident, everyone lost in their own microsleep states on occasion. We did run into a new issue when it came to keeping them awake, knowing that one was almost incapable of digesting food at this point, not that he was really eating. The others have begun exhibiting signs of voluntary starvation, refusing food that they're given. It doesn't seem like they know what we were doing with the food, but instead, just foregoing eating on their own sense of preservation, or lack thereof. I worry that we'll have an issue with malnutrition leading to unconsciousness eventually, so we're monitoring that closely. In the meantime, we've determined that we should move on to the next stage of keeping them awake. We were given access to a neurotoxin provided by the United States military. This, when applied, prevents shutdown of cognitive functions and will not allow for even microsleeps. It was essentially concentrated amphetamines in a gaseous form, which would be pumped through the room at intervals as needed. This is where things would change though, as while the gas was present, nobody was allowed in or out. To get into the room, we would have to do a total flush of the system and room's air, essentially turning it into an airlock before flooding it with oxygen again. It was complicated, but kept the rest of us safe from the potentially deadly ramifications. Taryn came back from her shift tonight, though she still looked shaken from the experience. I offered to take over for her if needed, but she said she was fine and wouldn't let herself be shaken like that again. I admire her tenacity in the face of it all, but I hope she's right. I'll be going to bed now. Hopefully, things stay peaceful for a bit, because I'm exhausted. I may take some of the sleeping pills from the medical bay, assuming I can't sleep again. Day 9. Not much of a believer, but I'll thank God for letting me get an actual night of sleep. I finally felt refreshed for the first time in days, and for once, ready to face the day ahead. Taryn got through her shift fine. One would occasionally mutter something to her about her father being there, always watching over her. 2 was even more delirious than the previous day, huddled in his room, cowering in the corner and peeking fitfully between his fingers every so often at the doorway. 2.
Please make them leave.
I didn't respond, trying to interact as little as possible and just see how it plays out. A burly man with questionable tattoos all over him, crying in a corner about girls being around him, was honestly the funniest thing I've seen in weeks, despite the horror of the past week surrounding it. 5 was the next one to suffer a serious break. His cool demeanor was on the decline ever since 1 and 2's confrontation the other day. Now, he was complaining that there was something burning somewhere, asking why nobody was doing anything about it. 5.
Doesn't anyone else smell that? That smoke. We're about to go up in flames in here, and they don't even care.
There wasn't any fire found. Despite that, he kept complaining of the smell while moving around to every wall, trying to feel for a way out like there would be some trap door. 4 and 3 seemed to be having contention, each staying in an opposite corner but throwing furtive, venomous looks at each other. I don't know what their deal was, but at some point, I heard 4 ask if they would let him sleep if he killed someone for them. Whoever them was, I don't know, though he could have been referring to us. 3 complained consistently of a rotten smell, saying it smelled like bodies rotting. It's possible it could be a side effect of the gas, but the way he was complaining about it, he was convinced that he really was smelling bodies. Though how he knew what that smelled like, I don't know. He was pretty far in the throes though, and 4 seemed to be looking at him for his sacrifice to get his own peace. Most stayed in their catatonic states for the time being, passing the rest of the day without incident. 1 was still going, though not doing a whole lot. Despite the massive blood loss, he was miraculously still alive and cognitive. I'm hoping for a peaceful night of sleep again. Philip took over in a relatively good spirit, so hopefully the worst of the chaos is done. Day 10. I cursed us by thinking the worst was over. Everything's gone to hell again as we've reached the 10th day. Everyone else catching up to where 1 was days ago, and now showing the same signs. 4 has managed to scratch his way out of his casts, though he's no longer self-mutilating. 5 was hyperventilating in a corner, staring furtively around as he complained of the burning smell still. I didn't sleep peacefully, probably too much to ask after the past few days' events. Instead, it was fitful, with constant thoughts back to what my own mother had gone through when fighting her own insomnia. She constantly spoke about others appearing near the end, with hallucinations taking hold hard as the condition worsened. In a way, she was lucky. The disease only took a few weeks to take her after the total insomnia took hold of her, and didn't suffer any of these kind of issues. Of course, it was its own hell. Just like watching my grandfather pass from dementia years earlier, she broke down mentally and was barely my mother by the end. 5 began to scream in pain, saying that they were grabbing him all over, writhing on the floor in agony. I called Murray and Philip in, telling them we may be having a medical event, and they came rushing. I did a quick gas cycle, hoping it would clear everything before we stepped in, and we ran through the door as the room filled with oxygen. I don't know how it happened. 5 suddenly combusted, hot flames bursting forth from his body in a raging inferno. My theory is that the sudden influx of oxygen must have led to it, but I wasn't sure where the source of the ignition could come from. Murray pulled a fire extinguisher from the outside wall, spraying him down, putting the flames out. Philip and I carried him out to the medical bay, trying to get some semblance of dressing on the wounds. They were pretty bad, skin charred and still giving off wisps of smoke. His screams were the worst though, like he was being tortured in the pits of hell while laying burnt before us. Despite the shock he should have been in, he was still screaming, begging us to get them off of him. Philip, we're going to try and fix you up, okay? Did you have matches, a lighter, anything that could have caused the fire? 5. They grabbed me. The hands grabbed me. All of them. Please get them off of me. Please. As we stripped what remained of his clothes off, checking the extent of the awful burns, we noticed patterns different from the majority of his body. Around his ankles and wrists were handprints, or more like hand indentations, with even deeper burns nearly down to the damned bone. Everything was cauterized nearly immediately at least, the heat searing blood vessels closed before any could escape. We bandaged him as best as we could, leaving him to lay in the medical bay. The hell with keeping the gas administered. One's injuries were already giving us cold feet about the experiment, but after seeing a man spontaneously combust with nothing flammable in his reach, then seeing the awful marks of hands, I think we're seeing something much worse than deprivation take hold. We were shaken from each of our fearful contemplation by the sound of the gas alarm. It was getting ready to start pumping in more, alerting us to make sure the door was closed and sealed properly. We made a fatal error. Though we were successful in sealing the door on time, Murray forgot to remove the spent fire extinguisher when we carried 5 out. We only spotted it after the gas began pumping into the room, and by that time, 2 saw his chance at escape. There was no way of stopping the gas cycle once it was in process, and it wouldn't stop until the sensor saw the air was totally saturated. 2 smashed the extinguisher into our observation window, breaking through it in only 3 good hits. As glass burst inward, we all shrank to the back of the room, Philip and I shocked, both immediately aware that we were, in scientific terms, fucked. The gas would take hold quickly, and as of yet, we were only administering more as a safeguard, unsure of the efficacy and time that it would last. Whenever 2 tried crawling through the broken glass into the room, he cut himself deep on the shards still in the windowsill. Deep cuts down his forearms gushed blood as he made his way toward us. Murray whipped a gun from his belt, pointing it at the hulking man. He wasn't able to fire off a shot before it was snatched from his hand by an invisible force. Something determined he wouldn't be killing 2. In only moments, we found out whatever was there didn't want us killing him because it wanted to do the honors. A whole chunk of flesh was ripped from his neck, blood flowing from the wound and soaking any still dry parts of his filthy clothes. He screamed, but that wasn't the end of it. Before our eyes, he was knocked backward into the room, flat on his back on the tile floor. In only moments, he was spread eagle on the floor, arms and legs stretched to their limits and only being pulled further. Before long, the invisible force was pulling him like a damned drying rack they would torture people with before electricity. The gruesome pop is something I'll hear for the rest of my life. As his limbs stretched, joints began to pop from his ankles and wrists, moving inward as elbows, knees, hips, and shoulders were pulled apart slowly, maximizing the pain he felt the entire time. The other subjects were too stunned to do anything themselves. And now, we had a whole different problem. The gas sensors outside the lab were alerted, initiating a lockdown procedure. Steel shutters came down over the only exits out, with windows getting the same treatment as emergency lights began to flash on. Through the red strobing, we could see the limbs on 2 completely separate from his body, pulling off with one last sick pop before blood began flowing. An intercom came on, giving a safety announcement.
Alert! Nerve agent has escaped outside of lab confinement. Please remain calm, and help will be with you shortly.
That was 5 hours ago. Help hasn't come. Nobody will either, I don't think. I've been talking to Philip and Taryn. Murray's been listening into, and we all agree this was something planned all along. The bastards that gave us this grant and facility, I think they wanted a true test of their nerve gas, and they got a great sampling of people to use it on in here. Every time we try to call the emergency line we were given, even for the security guys, there's nothing. Just a canned response of,
Please remain calm, and help will be with you shortly.
If the bastards wanted to help, they would have done it by now. Looks like we're just gonna be another casualty of Uncle Sam's morbid curiosity though. Doubt we're the first. Jesus, the gas is terrible. It feels like I'm back in college on a permanent version of the Coke and Adderall cocktail that would keep me up for a couple of days to get through finals. This was more intense though, like an electrical wire running up my spine that kept me from sitting still. The real tell that makes me think that this was part of the plan all along. There's no way to shut off the gas from in here. It's controlled by a remote output apparently, with us allowed to do the air cycling when needed. Otherwise, it goes in 10-minute intervals, though the sensor that tells it when it's saturated isn't going to make it stop anytime soon. It has to fill the entire facility now after all. But nobody installs something like this without a kill switch if they're not planning on fucking over everyone inside. Despite mine and Murray's attempts at breaking through the door, it was useless. We tried waiting for the dinner cook to arrive, hoping they would be able to get us out of here. But it looks like they were told to take the night off. So, looks like I'm dying from insomnia before my own genetics can even take me. How fun. Day 11. 2 is still alive. His wounds, where arms and legs were pulled off, have scabbed over, but he's definitely in insurmountable pain. 1 has left his room to watch him, saying that the girls are enjoying their retribution. He's still complaining about the kids around him, but otherwise, he hadn't shown any more injuries. Maybe the injury to his skull was helping keep him safe somehow, but that's a whole other matter. All of us, the non-subjects at least, though I guess we're all subjects now, have given up on any semblance of sleep or shifts. We're trapped in here, and even if I wanted to tell anyone reading this where we were to come and rescue us, I have no fucking clue. They picked me up at the Denver airport and carted me off into nowhere, so my guess is as good as yours. They knew what they were doing. Taryn says Philip and I are paranoid for thinking it, but it makes the most logical sense. Despite the now open observation window, the subjects didn't make any effort to leave their area. Perhaps they know it's pointless, that we're compromised too, and just as unlikely to make it out. Hell, maybe their karma is that we now get to experience this hell ourselves firsthand. I'm furthest along when it comes to time awake, with my time at 3 days straight now. To be honest, it's not the worst I've gone through. The worst is that I feel tired, but I can't settle my body into any kind of sleep. It's the same electrical feeling down my spine from the gas, still constantly pumping into our air supply. I don't think it was going at intervals anymore, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were now pumping it through the rest of the vents, making sure there was nowhere to hide. Despite the critical injuries already suffered to the subjects, we had our first deaths today. 2 of the security guards were found in their shared room, each one holding a gun with a similar bullet wound in their foreheads. Mutual suicide. Honestly, I'm jealous. I wish I had those kind of guts right now. Something was making me hang on here though, even if it was just some kind of morbid curiosity. I might just be too numb to feel any fear of death at this point. This is probably going to become a journal now instead of just research notes. Might as well maintain a record. People will probably consider it the ramblings of a madman. But we all know what we're seeing in here is real. Nobody will believe us. Day 12. Beginning to wonder if there's any point in keeping count of days anymore. The only way I know is by consulting the clocks around the facility and my computer, but who knows if those are accurate. I haven't seen the sun since the shutters came down, and at this point, I don't know if I'll ever see it again. Wish I would have enjoyed my time outside more while I still had it. The subjects are still alive. I don't know if we've passed some sort of advanced regeneration point, but we did take a blood sample for analysis from 2. He was still alive. Something torturing him. It's like the invisible force that ripped him apart would wait for his wounds to scab over, taking their time, then poking hard at the healing skin, making it bleed again as they pulled it off. He couldn't do anything but scream in pain. 1 didn't seem catatonic anymore at all. He had passed into a new point, one where he was bright-eyed and awake for the first time in days. He started talking to us, with nobody in particular as his target, just open-ended questions. 1.
So, what are you in here for? What did you do? Wanna know what I did?
2.
Shut up. Shut up. Stop singing.
1.
Oh, that's not me.
4.
Please let me go. Please just let me out of here. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
3 was huddled in his corner again, facing inward and muttering how he was going to teach someone a lesson, and they would listen to him after all was said and done. We got the answer on that pretty quick, because he was the first to respond. 3.
I needed to teach that bitch a lesson. She wanted to get uppity, and I had to show the kids what happens when you get like that. How they should be a man. A woman is supposed to submit to her husband, damn it. And if she won't, I've got every right to punish her. What's so wrong about living by God's word?
1.
Oh, that's the woman beside you. Huh, looks like she brought the kids for a visit. You showed them their place too?
3.
They would have ended up just like her if I hadn't saved them. They would have been ungrateful to any man they were lucky enough to have. I kept them pure. They died pure.
Taryn looked like she was going to throw up. I made a motion for her to leave the room. She shook her head, refusing to be shaken once again. The woman was showing strength I hadn't seen since my mother passed, and that was a high bar. 1.
Damn, dude. At least I just shut up a school because they were bullies.
There's 2 mysteries solved now. 1 was a shooter, and fit the stereotype honestly, while 3 was a family annihilator. I lost a lot of pity I had for either of them through the experiment then, especially when one started describing his spree. 1.
You know, it was really easy to get shots off. Have they changed that yet? I've been locked up for years, so I've only been told hearsay. God, back in my day you could just walk right in with a 12 gauge in hand. I could see Erica standing right over there, speak of the devil. Not sure if she's looking at me or not though, since there's not much to her face anymore. Oh, I think I get it now. They appear how they died. That's why your family is soaking wet, right?
3.
I drowned them.
1.
What'd you use? Bathtub? Baptize them in the old river downstream? Come on, tell me.
3.
I tied cinder blocks to their feet and threw them in our pool.
1.
Damn, that's intense. Good on you, buddy. Innovative. How about you, Jeffrey Jr.? What are you in for?
4.
None of your damn business.
1.
Oh, the little group around you says otherwise. Lots of hospital gowns. They look fucking delirious too. More than all of us.
4.
I was trying to help.
1.
Help what? The Grim Reaper?
2.
Shut up, shut up, shut up.
1.
Calm down, boss. We know what you're in here for. Look at all these girls. I lost fucking count, and they look pretty young. Care to explain?
2.
Fuck you.
1.
Yeah, don't think we needed any explanation anyway. Honestly, I look like a saint compared to you all.
4.
Please, shut up.
1.
What do you think the other guy had? I saw a bunch of burning body parts around him. I know the default answer is probably arson, but my personal theory is that he was in charge of some major war crimes. Those things looked obliterated and cooked. Like, well done cooked.
He was relishing this at this point, even though he was missing half of his organs. This son of a bitch was commanding the room like a storyteller, spilling everyone's darkest secrets. When he looked at us, I felt my blood run cold. 1.
Now you, lady, I get. I understand that you're innocent of any crime. I'm sorry that you're about to go through this. Now you two, though?
He looked squarely at Philip and I, leveling eyes at us like lasers set to stun. We were frozen in place, entranced by his act of psychological torture. 1.
You have 2 people. Now, I don't think a good guy like you would do something like that intentionally, right? They're pretty mangled after all.
1 only has a part of his head.
Ha, we should be friends.
He gestured to his own head, the flattened part bulging out now from brain swelling. Philip wouldn't answer upon hearing that, shutting down in fear while his mind pondered the ramifications. They were likely the friends he killed in his drunken joyride. 1.
Oh well, you're probably going to see them yourself soon. You though, who's the woman?
The electricity in my spine from the gas was nothing compared to the bucket of ice that was just injected right into my bone marrow. I know who it is. I just can't bear to fucking say it. 1.
Kind of a dick move if you killed an old lady. Hell, the only one in here who doesn't have something hanging around is that guy.
He pointed at Murray then, giving him a thumbs up. 1.
Well, things are only about to get worse. Kirk over here is telling me that they're going to torture me in ways I've never imagined.
2 was screaming for him to shut up now, as 1 just started to laugh again, taunting all of us. He had passed the point of sanity, but just might have achieved something beyond it at this point. All of us left, going back to the dining table and sitting in silence for a time. I'm so sorry, Philip started whispering under his breath. I don't know if he was telling us, himself, or the things that were probably still following him, but he broke down sobbing eventually. I wandered off to read for a bit, trying to find anything to calm my racing mind. Even after all this, I'm trying to come up with some sort of scientific answer. Despite all my logic though, the real evidence in front of me is supernatural at least. Day 13. I've had bad doses of irritability, but nothing like this. God, every small sound is terrible, making the headache I've been nursing for days only get worse. Philip has taken to being a recluse in his cot, crying on and off in between long dissociative episodes. He would just stare at the wall, not even bothering to pay attention to the food we brought him. We offered food to the subjects still inside, but all refused, saying that they weren't hungry anymore. Every one of them is exhibiting the same symptom now, seeing other people around them that are, seemingly, from their past. It's getting hard for me to focus. I'm having my own episodes of dissociation. Sleepwalking is probably the best way to put it. Cognitive function isn't doing so great either, so forgive me if there are words misspelled in future entries. Assuming there are future entries. I hope I can keep going. Day 14. 5 got up on his own today, after laying in the medical bay since he caught fire, screaming in pain as his skin started to slough and peel off. He got right up and walked out of the room. I don't know what was driving him, but he started beating on the windows, now shuttered from the outside since the shutdown started. Bits of skin and streaks of blood left marks all over the glass, with his fists banging against it in vain, like a solemn funeral drum. If only they could have funerals. Examination of blood samples shows that, while the cells can be broken down and individually destroyed to the point of irreparable damage, they can't outright die. It seems that something is keeping them here, making sure that they're trapped in this hellish limbo. It's my belief that this correlates with the healing process during sleep, with the lack of rest leading to cells going into a sort of preservative stasis instead of going through regeneration as they would during REM sleep. It's essentially a state of conscious cryogenics, frozen to keep them alive while they feel everything. 2 is still being tortured, by whatever is there. I fear once we get closer, I'll start seeing these phantoms that they've been seeing. 3 began to choke earlier, coughing water from his lungs as he struggled for breath. It just kept coming from nowhere, gallons of it at one point, mixed with blood from the pressure on his lungs. The more disturbing thing was 4's reaction to it, shrinking back in fear as he saw the water beginning to pool on the floor. He looked wild-eyed, terror in his face as he fell back, trying to get as far away as possible from it while beginning to choke himself, throat violently spasming, muscles contracting so hard they were visible to the naked eye. I'm afraid of what will happen when we reach that point. 4 is still holed up in his room, almost foaming at the mouth as he stares around, shouting on occasion at the specters around him. 4.
I was trying to help you, I swear.
I stopped watching around that time, tired of hearing the laughter of 1 as he watched the carnage. I noticed that every so often he would jerk, body convulsing momentarily, before a bleeding hole would open up wherever it originated, invisible bullets puncturing his skin. I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I can still find something that will help with my disease. But I'm not sure. I'm afraid I'm going to be trapped in this hell. Day 15. I've started hearing voices, all kinds of different ones, some louder than others, and sometimes more than I can discern, all talking over each other. I'm assuming this is only the beginning, and I've started hearing the sounds the subjects have been listening to for days. The eerie song that 2 has been complaining about is horrible. It's just some sing-song threats set to an off-kilter tune that nobody can decide the melody to. It's like a musical straight from the pits of hell, all sung by young girls. It's terrifying. I hear screams too, and the occasional gunshot. I think everyone is just jumbling together, being in such close proximity. It's hard to pull anything meaningful out of the mess of noise. I think the worst one is the sound of muffled screams. The wails of someone unable to breathe as they desperately shout for help. I can feel my mind going more, cognition slipping bit by bit as the hours wear on outside. 2 has stopped screaming, at least, seemingly numb to the pain now. I'm sure it's only a matter of time before he suffers some new horror though, because the little girl's voices are getting much louder as time went on without his screams. After some time, Taryn joined me, looking in at the scene in front of us. The floor by 3 was almost flooded at this point, and there was still water gurgling from his mouth on occasion, though he was laying sideways on the floor now, almost unable to move from the convulsions in his lungs. Red tinted the water, with small chunks of flesh coming out every so often. I'm theorizing his lungs are beginning to break from the stress, tissue peeling off as he coughs up more water. 4 of the deuced is showing signs of rabies infection. I don't think it's something he had before either, as the symptoms have onset much more rapidly than any noted study. He was salivating wildly, foaming at the mouth as his own spit made his throat swell up, desperately rejecting the water with great pain to him. He was sweating, drenched and curled up in the corner. "Do you think there's like a point of no return?" Taryn asked, breaking the silence between us. She almost made me jump, forgetting she was there in my current waking dream state. "Those guards died, right? But none of the subjects have. Maybe we'll be safe if we kill ourselves now." "How do we know we're not too far already?" I asked. "I'm further than any of you. I had a 48-hour head start before we got gassed even. I'm hearing shit, Taryn. I don't know when I'm going to start seeing things, but I know it's not going to be pretty." "One way to find out," she said, picking up a shard of broken glass still on the floor by the observation window and running it across her forearm, straight down the middle. Blood began to gush from the wound, pouring to the ground at our feet in splattering drops. She looked at me as the life force left her body. Yet, nothing changed. Even as the blood poured down her arm, she stayed conscious, staring right at me as tears began to roll from her eyes. If she's already at that point, I know I'm absolutely past it. It would have been better if we didn't make it out of this alive. But our hubris is going to make sure that we're here, awake for every screaming minute of this fucking hell. We parted for the time, both going to ponder what was in store for us, or try to think of a way out of this damn place. I doubt we have anything that can break the windows in, but we'll see what we can do. Maybe we can get some clean air coming in here some way. At this point, I'm ready to try anything. Day 16. I honestly don't even know if that's the right day. At this point, everything is blurring together. I'm on 8 days, I believe, of no sort of sleep whatsoever. The feeling of electricity in my spine is the only thing keeping me going at this point, making it impossible to stay still or fall into any kind of rest. The auditory hallucinations have gotten much worse, and now I can clearly hear the numerous horrors inside the subject room. Even worse, the smells are beginning to come through as well, only adding to the stench of excrement and old viscera exuding from the observation room. Nothing I've done has worked. I've tried a few methods of killing myself at this point. Hanging was ineffective, leaving me with nothing but a bruised neck and trouble breathing since. Taryn made it obvious that blood loss wouldn't do anything, so that was useless. An attempted drowning in the bathtub was cut short when I realized asphyxiation wouldn't do anything, just like when I hung myself. Probably for the best because that was an awful, awful feeling. My last attempt was a tried and true classic, the Reaper's bath bomb. I plugged in the air fryer from the kitchen, figuring a toaster just might not have the oomph I needed. I filled the bath, turned the fryer on 400, and let me cook. I can still smell something burning, probably my internal organs, considering everything still feels like it's on fire. The aches aren't going away, and I'm not sure that I'll be able to stay alive once I'm finally out of this, assuming I ever am. I'm going to search for other ways if push comes to shove. We have some drugs in the medical bay, but I'm honestly not holding out hope at this point. Day 17. I'm starting to see things. Whatever the noises are coming from, whatever the others have been seeing, they're finally starting to appear for me. They're not in focus though. It's like looking through a patterned glass window. Their basic shape is there, but everything is blurry or mismatched. Colors end where they shouldn't, and others warp, so nothing is clearly distinguishable. I'm terrified of what I'm going to see when they become more clear, as what's already showing is horrifying. Some of the figures gathered around one are terrifying, with many just having large red prisms of color where hits should be. Meanwhile, most of the ones around two are wearing a bright pink. And the singing is something I can hear no matter where I am. It never stops. I've seen water dripping on the floor here and there from seemingly nowhere, but I see now it's due to those gathered around 3. Their screams are some of the worst, like someone shrieking at the top of their lungs on the water. I can only imagine this is the sound they were making when they died. 5 hasn't stopped banging at the door, and I still don't know what it is that is surrounding him. There are just mounds? Not people figures, like the others. Okay, some are humanoid, I guess, but others are just massive piles. The worst thing is, it looks like they're burning. Molten embers pulsing among dark grey and black fractals of light. Philip is catatonic at this point, and I think it's more because he's shutting down from stress. I believe he's at the point of audible hallucinations, so I would imagine he's hearing the same things I am. Whatever is around him, the sounds are of screams and flames, a smell of charred flesh lingering in the air. 4 seems to have gone feral, and we locked him in his room due to the signs he was exhibiting. Whether it was just a psychosis exhibiting rabies-like symptoms or not, that's a whole other hell we aren't willing to bring in here. He was almost howling in his delirium, hair matted and skin glistening in sweat as he tore at it, trying to get something out of himself. I know there's someone behind me too. I know who they are. I know why they're here. I just can't bear to face that. Murray has checked in on me from time to time. I believe he is the same state of audio hallucinations, but has yet to get a grasp of everything. The only other guard still alive has expended every bullet he could find from the security room, putting each one into his own head. He's still sitting in there, clicking an empty gun against what remains of his jaw. The top and back of his head are almost gone, one eye lolling out of his skull to stare at the gun as it clicks again empty. I have noticed one constant no matter where I go, and it's not the one that's attached to me. This figure is clearer, made up from millions of refracting and morphing beams of light, every color I could think of and beyond. I think it was human, and the face was kind, even welcoming. But no matter how close I tried to get to it, it was like I was being pulled away. It was staying in the same place, but I just couldn't reach it. Like infinity was standing between us at any given moment, no matter how long or fast I walked towards it. An eternity passed while getting no closer. I don't know what this is, but I believe it may be the key to stopping all of this. Day 18. The figures are growing clearer now. Jesus, these images are worse than any nightmare I could conjure up. Even after my worst bouts of sleeplessness, they're still not totally there. But now, they're less broken, I guess is the best way to put it. It feels like I'm watching old footage of a flip phone camera, like someone tried to make a horror movie on one. The girls still dancing in circles around too, occasionally taking a leaf from their spot to kick or hit him. They were Frankensteined, mangled corpses of girls cobbled together. There were stitches along their necks, and eyes were missing from some. There was this horrible makeup like a harlequin doll that was on their face. The pink dresses they wore were stained with scarlet blood right in their abdomens. Two was approaching the same state of lucidity as one has been in since a few days ago. He's not taking things as well though, with mostly unintelligible screams before one of the little girls used their high heel shoes to stomp into his face. I can see from the observation window one of his eyeballs skewered through one little girl's stiletto heel. If we're being honest, I was rooting for them. At least someone was getting some good out of this situation. For and his things, they've begun to rip each other apart. First, he made a lunge at one of them. Then they all started going at it, beginning to rip him from limb to limb while biting his flesh. Hospital gowns flapped as they ran, showing bare asses that would have been comical if not for the savage gore staining the gowns. One was still in high spirits somehow, despite now being riddled with bullet holes. At some point, I heard a much louder bang than usual and checked the room to see that the caved-in part of his skull was now wide open, brains splattering the wall behind him. Despite that, he was still jovial, congratulating one of his many phantoms on their great aim. All that he got back was a gurgling scream from one that was missing its entire upper skull, face consisting of nothing but lower jaw and flapping tongue. It must have been in control of the shots, because something else hit him, splattering gore through the front of his shirt, just like what happened on the exam table all those days ago. Taryn is just hanging by a thread, though she's gone mostly catatonic now as well. There's an older man who keeps hovering around her, though he simply glares from afar instead of doing anything. I've lost track of the times I've woken up, so to speak, unsure of where I am or how I got there. It's just moments of blacking out here and there, without any telling what could be happening in between points A and B. Philip? I don't know what's happening to Philip. He's lately taking to sitting in his cot, covering his ears and just screaming at the top of his lungs. His pleas alternate between apologies and begging for his life, but he's screaming as if he's trying to be heard over a cacophony of terrible sounds. To his credit, that is the case, as the two figures near him are screaming in constant, shrieking pain. They're just pillars of fire, standing beside him at all times. He's been complaining of the heat in between fits, saying that he's burning up, and I can see why finally. The issue is confronting my own demon, so to speak. I can see her clearly now, the exact same way she looked when she died, peaceful for once, instead of screaming in delirium about the thing that was after her. It was as if she had gone in her sleep. Though that wasn't the case at all. She was there, awake, screaming in delusions and convulsing as the prion ate away at her brain, taking any semblance of peace from her for the 6 months before she died. God, I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry that I've brought myself to this. I just wanted to help myself. Help anyone like us. I'm so sorry. They... ? I've been... gone. I guess that's the best way to put it. I don't know if it was some kind of trauma response paralysis from the lack of sleep, or the hallucinations taking hold. By my calendar, it should be day 25. I don't know how I'm missing an entire week, but things since I've been gone have begun to rapidly deteriorate. Taryn is barricaded in the kitchen, knife in hand and pointing it at anything that comes near. She keeps complaining of a pounding pain in her head, right at the base of her skull. The old man was still standing across the room, only glaring at her from afar and muttering under his breath. Everything was so clear now. It was like making the switch from an old box television to 4K. The smell and sound of the damned around us was something that haunts me, even while I'm awake, and I'll likely never forget for the rest of my hopeful short life. When I try to find Philip, he was a smoldering corpse, desperately wheezing for breath on the floor. The pillars of flame were still gathered near him, looking down at his charred body as he begged for death. I found 5 in the main room, now surrounded by piles of ashen-burnt limbs. Mangled torsos, hands, arms, and even heads here and there were piled around, all still burning with smoke coming off. The smell of gunpowder was thick, making my nose sting as I entered. The hands were moving toward his burnt body, desperately trying to pull him further into the ground, toward whatever hell could still be waiting for us after this. He didn't even try to fight, simply insisting that they deserved it, every single one of them. I could hear distant explosions, echoes of a land of death somewhere far beyond here. Despite everything, the constant figure was still there, right on the edge of my vision, far away yet close enough to reach out and touch if I just gave it my all. Yet, it was never enough. It never came closer, and I could never actually reach it. It was like trying to throw a punch on the water as soon as I got close enough to think I would touch it. It almost looked sad to see that I couldn't reach it, and at one point extended a hand to me as well, almost like it was trying to help me get away. I could see cosmos flowing through its body, bright stars and nebulas dotting it up and down. Every time I looked into its eyes, it was like seeing 2 neutron stars collide. A magnificent light that makes everything else seem dull in comparison. If only I could reach it. But even when it gives me its hand, our fingers were never destined to touch. I was trapped in boundless infinity, close, but never close enough to touch. I'm going to try coming up with a plan to escape. I can at least get Taryn out of here with me, but everyone else is a lost cause. They can stay in this hell for all I care. They... ? I've been in and out of conscious control of my body for a while still, unsure of what's happened for the last few hours or days. I'm in a constant dream state, somewhere between awake and asleep on the permanent edge of night. Everything around me is so vivid, and the horrible things that have been lurking around the subjects have started acknowledging me when I observe. I worry that they may turn their wrath to me, and it's time to enact my plan before it's too late. I believe at this point, we're 30 days in. I had a memory while I was paralyzed at one point, body shutting me out of control while my mind told me anything to keep me busy. I could see my mother, gaunt face staring at me with wide, unknowing eyes that were in the throes of insomnia, just like I was now. I remembered our last moments. Her symptoms came on slow at first, just the occasional sleeplessness here and there, nothing too bad. Over the next few weeks, it began to fill more nights, staying up even after taking the strongest sleeping pill her doctor could prescribe. It wasn't getting her anywhere though, and soon enough, she was getting maybe 5 hours of sleep a week. Not long after, she started having the hallucinations. She kept telling me that she could see my father, berating her again for something beyond her control. That was just another Tuesday night at home growing up, seeing the old fuck get drunk in front of the television until he was ready to take out his frustrations. When he finally died, I was 13, and I don't think I've ever seen my mom more content with life. After a few weeks, her bruises were finally healed, and she was practically glowing with energy to make things better for both of us. She only had 4 more good years after that before all of this happened. The hallucinations got worse, with paranoia becoming a major part of it. She swore that there were shadows watching her from every corner, waiting for her to go to sleep so they could take her body for their own. Soon, she refused to turn off lights in the house, having me install the brightest bulbs I could to try and keep them at bay. I did it, of course, because what else am I supposed to do for my mother while she's staying awake up until her final hour? I could at least humor her and put her mind at ease a little. Not that she knew I was her son at this point, constantly asking me who let me in or confusing me for her older brother at some points. Finally, she had this moment of lucidness. She actually spoke to me like I was her son again, not some stranger in her home. "Mikey, I want you to end this," she said to me one night as we sat watching Jeopardy. She always loved Trebek, and there wasn't a single night we missed out on watching. We had made it a game for the longest time between ourselves, seeing who could outscore the other. She didn't know what was going on anymore, but I was hoping it was something that could give her peace in the middle of it all. I was surprised, not expecting her to even talk other than babbling gibberish at this point. "You don't deserve to go through this. Nobody does." "Mama, what are you talking about? I'm taking care of you until it's done," I said, looking over at her and expecting sanity to break again at any moment. The solemn stare she gave me let me know that she was 100% in control right now, completely sane and sober to a fault. "We both know this is as bad for you as it is for me. I want you to let me go on my own terms, Mikey," she said, tears in her eyes. "I don't care how you do it. Just make it quick for me, please. I can still see things, and I can't take it much longer." Okay, Mama." I was sobbing now, nodding that I would help her. I don't know what else I was supposed to say. But her speaking to me like that again, after the weeks of nothing but screaming and terror we had been through, let me know that she was right. She knew when it was time, and she knew that prolonging this only made it worse. It wasn't something I could just do. Days passed while I grappled with it. The morality aspect, and if I could even do it. This was my mother, the woman who raised me and protected me all those years, taking the brunt of my father's anger and rage. How could I repay her by killing her? Every time I think of her, all I could remember was what she told me, even until the end. Those same words. "I've got you. I've always got you, even when you don't." I waited until she had taken one of her doses to attempt a little sleep, watching her doze off into a little restless nap. That was when I did it. Taking one of her couch pillows, I put it over her face, pressing down with all my weight as I looked away, tears stinging in my eyes. She struggled for a minute, body fighting back instinctually to claw at life. I pushed down harder, beginning to match her muffled screams from under the pillow with my own long, dreadful wails. Finally, she was still. It was gradual, movements beginning to slow, becoming smaller, weaker as she lost oxygen. Finally, she was sleeping, eternally, safe from the hell her brain was putting her through here. I told the doctors I found her like this, putting the pillow under her head so she looked like she had just drifted off. Considering her condition, they didn't bother with an autopsy, so I was in the clear. A secret I would keep until death, when I would be able to apologize to my mother personally. Over the past few days of slipping sanity, I could hear her muffled screams coming in clear, the same sounds as her last breaths. Before long, she was visible, standing right there near me, staring me down. I've tried to keep ignoring her, making my way around the facility to check on the others. By all accounts, the only ones who should still be alive are myself, Taryn, and Murray. The others are all far beyond the point of death, still somehow living and functioning. One had taken to wandering the facility, making finger guns at various specters and causing viscera to fly from their bodies. He got the same treatment in turn though, with the wounds he was suffering now something akin to shotgun blasts. Much of his body was shredded, and there was a bone splintering out of his hip, causing him to limp and walk with a stagger through the hallways. Somehow, I haven't gone nose blind from the intense smells scattered through the facility. The subject quarters smelled of excrement and death, while our quarters were filled with the stench of burning flesh cooking over an intense fire, with the smell of burning tires to accent it. Taryn has been having more moments of clarity lately, and though we've both been going through dissociative episodes, we have been able to talk and try to theorize what the hell is going on. In our deductions, we've come up with a few ideas that in hindsight should have been massive red flags. First, I had no part in the subject selection, and she says she didn't either. Doubt Philip had any kind of say either. Now, considering the lack of sleep beforehand for subject 1 and the relative similarity of all 5 subjects, which we didn't see until arriving, and at a point of no going back, there were far too many inconsistencies to pull off the experiment in the first place. That's what leads us to our second belief. We're all subjects. This one was obvious at this point, but they were the preliminary trial, while we were the main event. We got to see everything happening to them, observe it, and then see it all happen to us in real time. Where we're split is on what the purpose is. Nothing adds up to a typical experiment, and whoever is pulling the strings seemingly is just throwing shit at the fan to see how it splatters on the wall behind. Then Murray entered the conversation, giving us a whole new view. He was a former intelligence officer, worked in a lot of espionage stuff before going into the private security sector. From everything he had seen here, he suggested we were guinea pigs for the gas, some new kind of weapon meant to possibly take out enemy strongholds from the inside, making them turn against their own allies as the paranoia takes hold. As much as I hate to say it, it makes the most sense. We go in trying to do some good, trying to find cures for sleeplessness and diseases like mine, only to become a weapon test for someone. We turned our attention to the next issue at hand, the phantoms. We all could see them at this point. The students, the sewn-together girls, the drowned family, rabies patients, and the limbs. Nothing but mountains of limbs filling the space around 5. Murray told us he had only seen bodies like that in war zones, mostly after bombings. It was horrifying, and the smell of this burning flesh was a completely different one from Philip's room. The problem we were now running into was that all of these phantoms were taking notice of us. Taryn and I only had one each, and they, so far, hadn't shown any signs of trying to harm us physically like the subjects were undergoing. Every one of these terrors has started paying more attention to us, taking small breaks from their usual victims. It's only been watching us so far, but I don't know how they might escalate over time. If they can eventually harm us like they've harmed the subjects, well, I would rather die at that point if it was possible. I hope we can figure something out to escape before that. Then there was the greatest unknown. Since the beginning, we had all seen one figure in common, even Murray, who was free from phantoms clinging to him. This one figure, the dark one full of galaxies and nebulas, infinite stars in a human shape, was always there, right at the edge of our vision, but unable to be reached. They mentioned that they had tried reaching out to it as well, but ran into the same infinite void of space in between, keeping us away permanently. Every single one of us was seeing this, and when we eventually tracked down one, the only subject willing to speak to us, or maybe the only one able at this point, he told us it's always there for him. The jailer, he said. You can see it now, right? That's what keeps us here, keeps us in the cell, It's the one that makes sure we can't be free. I have my own ideas about what it is. It seems too benevolent, I guess. Like it's not trying to keep us anywhere. As is though, it's only getting further away. Like it's leaving us behind, hopeless to our cause. The three of us had made a plan. There's a surgical saw in the medical bay. I'm hoping we can use it to cut through one of the vents, and possibly, just maybe, get the hell out of here. It's going to be a long shot. Much rather try to escape than see what happens when those specters turn their full attention to us. Before anything else happens, I'm afraid I'm going to have to confront Mom. I don't want to, but I fear I won't get out of here alive until I face my fear. Day unknown. 3 is beginning to flood the subject room. I don't know how we've gotten to this point, but the only thing holding the water in there is the closed door. 1 has been in and out, but he always climbs through the window for some reason, leaving chunks of skin and scraping bone across the broken glass every time. The water is nearly ankle deep at this point, even filling the side rooms. I don't know where it keeps coming from, with an endless ocean cuffed from his lungs from seemingly nowhere. Eventually, it's going to come up and cover too, probably drowning him where he lay on the floor. I don't plan on being here for that, and it's not like he deserves to be saved anyway. The little girls dancing around him have become more vivid, with obvious signs of other terrible acts committed on them besides the dismemberment. 4 was still locked in his room, with the symptoms of rabies now in their final stages, scared of everything as the water seeped in under the door. He was desperate for a drink, I could tell, but even just looking at the water was making his throat spasm violently, as his mind told him it was poison. We have begun our escape attempt, though it took a while, as the surgical saw we have isn't the most powerful. It's really only meant for bone at the most, so going up against the steel used on the vents is one hell of a task for it. Eventually though, after some time, it began to get through, and from there, we were able to use a cane to pry the rest open. Murray went in first, clutching a flashlight and trying to find the right path out. Taryn and I stood anxiously as he explored, hoping against all hope that he would have some success. That was about the point where I went into a dream state. Against all my best efforts to stave it off, deprivation took hold yet again, leaving me on the precipice of sleep and waking, but unable to actually get to the destination I wanted. That was when she started talking. Mikey? It was the first time she had actually acknowledged me, instead of just staring blankly into space as she did for so many nights. I shut my eyes, preparing to go through some sort of torture for my sins. After all, I was no different from the people we did this to. I was willing to put humans through hell just to save myself from it, no matter how much I try to say it was some greater good bullshit I was doing. I was part of the problem. This hell was of my own making. I strained, keeping my eyes closed against all odds, trying not to face what had happened. Any moment I expected to feel something smothering me, waiting for my slow, agonizing death that would never end. I deserved this. It was all my fault. I killed her. It wasn't out of mercy, was it? It was a way out of taking care of her. A way out of seeing the rapid decline that I would have to face, counting my days until it took hold. It was to save me. I've got you, Mikey, I heard her say, right from in front of me as a hand touched my face. Slowly, ever so slowly, knowing that the feeling of peace imparted through those words could be snatched away in moments, I opened my eyes. Even when you don't, I've got you. She was smiling at me, warm and kind. We embraced, tears flowing freely down my face while I sobbed for forgiveness, telling her how sorry I was, how I never wanted to hurt her, billions of confessions and pleas for my mother's mercy. I've got you, she said again, giving me a little push now. Go. I felt Taryn grab me by the arm, pulling me close back to the vent. Murray was shouting through, yelling at us to come. The noise must have caught one's attention, as he came marching in from around the corner, water sloshing around his feet. He had finally opened the sealed door, letting threes floodwaters loose through the facility. It was rushing faster, like his brief sputters had now become a water hose. Though I couldn't see him, I could hear the drowning screams as he kept gushing water from his windpipe, as the specters around began crowding in. One was marching into view, leading them like some parade from the 9th circle of hell. He kept moving, smiling at us as he went, torso wobbling as his eviscerated body couldn't hold his spine steady. It was eerie. Looking closer, I could see one leg was already broken, foot missing and bloody stump dragging closer, leaving red water in his flooding wake. "The doors are open. You've been away too long." He was giggling, pointing at me as he laughed. I was still pulling myself toward the vents, desperately clambering inside. "The jailer's given up. You're officially free. Free to be you, free to be me, free to have fun with all your new friends. They've been so excited to meet you. Their playthings are getting a little boring, though they've had plenty of fun reacquainting themselves." Taryn was still pulling on me, Murray's voice breaking through the cacophony of abominations heading toward us. I finally got all the way into the vent, crawling as Mom smiled behind me, watching me leave as she was lost to the crowd of undead. They began coming after us, even in the vents. I made the mistake of looking back, seeing the dismembered, charred arms of 5's victims crawling after us. I sped up, desperately trying to outrun the death that was following after me. I knew they couldn't kill me, knew I would only face a millennia of terror if they took hold of me. I had gone too long past the point of no return. Once they got hands on me, I was theirs, forever. We got to the end, finally seeing a bit of light peeking through ahead of us. Murray was already standing there, having broken off the outer van to get out. The sun was up, daylight pouring in from our destination, golden rays that promised at least some sort of freedom. Electricity ran through my spine. Whether it was from the gas or my own adrenaline, I don't know. Practically falling out of the vent, Taryn and I hit solid ground and felt grass in our hands. It was beautiful, one of the best things I've ever felt. The phantoms were still thumping behind us though, threatening to drag us back into hell. There wasn't much other choice than to run, all of us staggering as we desperately crashed through trees and brush to try and find some safety. Eventually, we came out to a roadside, before we were swarmed, this time not by phantoms, but by black vans. Men jumping out and pulling guns on us as they threw thick cloth bags over our heads, then tossing us into the cars. I don't know how long we drove for. Not like my sense of time is anything to judge by anyway. When they eventually took us out, they still didn't take the bags off. The only way I could tell we entered a building was the change in sound and a blast of cold air conditioning hitting me, chilling my bones. Eventually, I was thrown into a room, Taryn alongside me. Murray was missing, nowhere to be found. As for the room, it was like having the script flipped on us. There was a one-way observation mirror on the side, with no way for us to see what was going on. A small bathroom with shower and toilet in the corner, 2 cots on the opposite wall, a desk sat in the middle of the room with 3 chairs. And that was it. The 2 of us had no idea what the hell we were supposed to do now. The door opened. Needless to say, we were not happy about who entered. Murray walked in the room, smiling at the both of us. "Sorry for the rough welcome, but there's still the possibility you could leak where we are if you recognized anything. I don't mind you talking about this, but I can't have you spilling the location," he said, taking a seat on one side of the table and gesturing us to the other side. Both Taryn and I sat down hesitantly, glaring at our friend as we began to put information together in our disoriented minds. "See, nobody is going to believe what you have to say anyway. Who would, after all? Sounds like one of those bullshit internet stories the kids are obsessed with these days." "Why are we here, Murray?" I asked, looking around furtively to see if there were any phantoms following us. "What's going on?" "Oh, don't you worry. You two are safe," he said, smiling. See, I took a liking to the two of you while we were all in that house. I told them we could use you still, so they let me get you out. You've been going through the same thing we have, man. What the fuck? Taryn was asking him now, beginning to bang on the table in frustration. Her eyes were red, bloodshot from tears and lack of sleep. For, God, how long has it been? Taryn broke down now. Why? Oh, I've been getting a solid 8 hours most nights. You two would never find me, but I was just fine, he said. My head hurt as dots connected. Murray's lack of specters, his long disappearances. Jesus, he was the one who left a fire extinguisher in the subject room. He knew. You have an antidote, don't you? I asked him, leveling a look right in his eyes that said to tell me the truth, or else. Of course, I wasn't going in there without one. He laughed. I was just there to observe how things went down, and control. You son of a bitch! Son of a bitch! Taryn began to scream, beginning to stand up and jump over the table at him. 2 guards entered the room, guns drawn and pointing at her. Despite our unfortunate immortality, she backed off, working on that basic survival instinct to stay alive. Look, I'm not going to stay here and spill everything. I helped you guys get out of there. Now we're going to detox you from the gas and see how it goes. As far as what happened, subjects aren't privy to experimental data, Murray stated, getting up to leave and ushering the others out. There's a computer over there if you want to catch up on the outside. Hell, tell people what happened to you, not like they're going to take it seriously. He left, with me in stunned silence and Taryn raging, banging against the table in frustration. Now, here I am, unsure of what to do. I thought I wouldn't make it out of there, much less be allowed to somehow tell the story. Too bad nobody is going to believe me. Day 54. Yeah, I'm shocked by the day too. We were in there nearly 2 months. Considering that the major violence started around day 10, I don't know how we got out. Neither me nor Taryn have slept yet, and we've been here for 12 hours so far by the clock on the wall. They've brought us food, but I'm not hungry. Now that I think about it, I stopped eating weeks ago. I'm paranoid they're going to do the same thing as we did, dosing the food to keep us up in the absence of the gas. Now that we're somewhere without screams and the smell of death, it feels like we can think more clearly. We've talked about it, everything that happened. The best hypothesis is that sleep maintains the barrier between life and death, earth and hell, so to speak. Whether that goes for the same pace for everyone is where I feel that we've seen variances, and Taryn suggests that it may be based on life experiences. When the barrier begins to thin, all these lost lives press through the barrier, eventually ripping it and giving them access to the subject physically. We have no idea if we're right, of course, but it's all we can draw from our time, especially considering we're still running off of the after effects of the gas. Murray hasn't spoken to us again, and I honestly don't know that he will. I don't believe we'll ever be let out of here to see the sun again, if I'm being honest. This room feels empty compared to the crowds of bodies and limbs that were around the facility for the past month and a half. If it weren't for Taryn, I would probably feel like the last man on earth, locked away and forgotten, as everyone else got to eternally dream in slumber. Day 56. The dream states are getting worse, with even more sporadic occurrences and longer cycles. I've still not seen any phantoms, and the jailer hasn't made a reappearance. Not for me at least. Taryn says that she's caught glimpses from the corner of her eye again. It had disappeared for her not long after it did for me, giving up hope on ever getting us back. She said it returned last night though. First, a small shadow in the corner, pushed as far back and away from her as could be. Since then though, she says it has started to grow closer, though still miles away in the same room. I'm slipping out again. If anything happens, I'll update. But what's the point anymore? Day 62. She's asleep. Taryn fell asleep 2 hours ago, I thought she had finally died somehow at first. Checking her pulse in fear to see if she was still with me. It was beating strong, and her breathing was now steady and deep. When I pulled one of her eyelids open, she was well into the deep REM cycle, finally resting after weeks of conscious hell. The last few days, she's mentioned the jailer growing closer, coming further into view. Both of us have been comparing symptoms as we've been here, noticing that the electric feeling in her spine was fading as the figure grew closer. It wasn't so unbearable anymore, sending electric shocks up and down our bodies still, but more like a light buzz instead of a taser now. A few hours ago, she mentioned that the jailer was closer than she had seen it before. She reached her hand out, touching it, and not long after, laid down to sleep. Nothing has appeared for me. Not the jailer, not the phantoms, nothing. The electricity is still there, and I'm hoping to some kind of god that it wears off so I may be able to sleep soon. Day 70. Taryn has been sleeping regularly for the past week now. The first time when I made my last update, she slept for nearly 20 hours straight. When she awoke, according to her, everything was bright, almost an electric vividness to the world. Since falling asleep, she hadn't seen anything. I still haven't seen the jailer return. That's what leads me to my final, terrifying conclusion. Day 80. They let Taryn out, though I don't know where. Maybe she's allowed to go back to her normal life. Can we do that at this point though? It doesn't matter. I don't have long. I know what it is now. The jailer. We've always had a name for it. Tons of them actually. Morpheus, Nyx, Hypnos, Somnus, Tsukuyomi. Every culture has their own version. But what it is really is sleep. Sleep itself. It only wanted to save us from the hell we made. It hasn't reappeared to me. I can't feel the electricity buzzing in my spine anymore. I've requested tests from the guard that brings in my food, and they've complied, taking me in for a brain scan. Please, pray that something will work for me. Dream for me. Sleep for me. Please. Sleep. Day 85. I can see them again. Not sleep. The subjects. They're all just there. They glare at me from the shadows in corners, watching me and waiting for their chance to strike. I don't know how they got here. I don't know what they want from me. Probably to tear me apart like their victims did to them. None appear as they did in life, but as they were left in the facility. Burned, drowned, ripped to shreds. Everyone is here, all because of me. I don't know at this point whether it's the hallucinations or if their souls have actually come for me. As of yet, they don't seem to want to come after me. I'm sure given time, that will change. Day 90. I fear I'm done. They're inching closer, eyes fixated on me. At least, the ones that have eyes. I can hear curses and screams coming from them. And one's obnoxious, mocking laughter won't get out of my ears. It came back too, though. It's still faint, but it's there. I can tell. The jailer? No, that doesn't seem like the right thing to call it. It's getting closer, the cosmos making up its body, pulsating as it does. I swear, in just hours, it's come so close. Closer than they have. They? ? She's back. Mom is here, and the others have gone away. They seemed angry when she showed up, like they were told their fun was called off. She's smiling at me though, that same smile that said it's all going to be okay. Mom just walked over to the jailer, still watching me from so close, but so goddamn far to still reach. She's taken the hand of the cosmos and extending her other hand towards me, reaching for mine. I don't know what may happen. I don't know if I'm just lost in my own delusion. But I think this will be it for me. I'm going to take her hand now. Goodbye.